Today I'm going to look at several clips from Apollo 17, the last ever moon landing. Some of these clips you may not have ever seen before and are quite rare. All of these clips are going to highlight the absurdity that is the moon landing and show it for the charade that it is. The first clip we get to see the cameraman filming events as they're doing a separation. And what we get to see is the cameraman pan from the globe Earth to the separated spacecraft, which has lots of debris as a result of the separation. But what we're actually looking at is a painted globe Earth and a space model stroke prop blended with special effects. The globe Earth is obvious, it's some sort of painting. But when you look at the space prop and then all the special effects, you'll see some cases the special effects of the debris bounce off the craft, which is bizarre considering it supposedly came from the craft. And yet others go straight through the craft, kind of exposing the special effects of the day that were 1972. So let's have this first clip. Like I say, painting of the globe Earth, then comes left to a space prop with special effects of debris which bounce off and in some cases go through the spacecraft. No sound on this old one. First up, what it appears to me is a blatant painting of a scientifically impossible globe, as we know. Madagascar looks a little bit different. And then it comes down to this space prop. Quite cleverly done, I guess, for the day. And then we've got space debris. Some of the space debris, as you can see, and are going to see, goes through the craft. And others bounces off it, which is strange considering the debris supposedly came from the craft as a result of the separation. But you can see debris going through the craft here. Again, I don't think they expected all these years later us to be looking at this in colour with good quality screens. I should imagine this was viewed on a small black and white TV back in the day, no doubt by people either fantasising and hoping this is real or people seriously off their nut on LSD. But as you've seen, it's a space prop stroke model. And of course we've seen numerous bits of so-called space debris go through the craft here, highlighting the fact it's special effects. And thankfully this isn't real and it's not space debris, because otherwise all these people would have been ripped to shreds and killed. Another bit of space debris going through the craft. You'll see some of it changes direction. Very strange. So essentially we've had space debris going through this craft. Let's just come back a smidge more. Coming through, see it there? Coming through, changing direction and going straight through the craft. It's ridiculous. Once more. Space debris going straight through that craft. Like I say, ridiculous. So we went from space debris that bounces off and mysteriously goes through this craft. And of course, not forgetting that painting of the globe Earth, which of course we all know is scientifically impossible. And it only gets worse. Bear with me. So, same mission. Apparently now they've travelled 250,000 miles to the moon, landed on the moon, did some science, and are now about to ascend from the moon's surface and dock with the lunar orbiter, which is above the moon's surface, approximately 60 miles according to these guys, doing 3,600 miles an hour going around the moon. This lunar ascender, its rocket, can only be started up once. Once it starts up and gets turned off, that's it. It's not like you can start it up, give it a little burst, then come back, turn it off, then do it again. You can't do that according to NASA. Once you fire up this ascender main rocket and turn it off, done. They're then relying on the RC thrusters, which are for orientation rather than travel. Okay? First up, we're going to watch this clip in slow motion. I want you to pay particular attention to the rocket plume coming out of the ascending rocket here, which is underneath this lunar ascender stroke lander. Okay, this vehicle is going to separate. You're going to see flames coming out the bottom of the lunar ascender, and then you're going to see them suddenly cut off. Okay, very, very telling. So slow motion, I will be pausing it and stopping it. Get ready for the takeoff. And we can see a simulated explosion, but it's really, as we all know, this is a prop. We've got what looks like, see now, the simulated rocket plume coming out the bottom of the ascender here. And again, see the rocket plume, the golden color there underneath. Remember, this is coming from the rocket engine that can only be turned on once, and when it turns off, that's it, done. Okay, watch that golden rocket plume. Still there as the craft is starting to lift off. Still there, thinning out. It's almost in a cone shape now. And just totally disappears. Give it another second. And the craft is risen up. Now the space fans at this point in time are going to go, it's an invisible plume. If that was the case, then we wouldn't have had the golden coloured plume at the start when this lunar ascender took off. Now if you're going to claim that was some kind of chemical reaction and that now the rocket is fully operational on its invisible plume, I'm afraid I'm going to destroy that as well, because if that was the case, we'd see distortion in the horizon and the hill behind this lunar ascender as a result of the hot fumes coming out of the rocket in the cold environment of the moon. We'd see distortion, but we don't. Let me show you what I mean. 2 secs. Here, if the fumes or the rocket plume was clear, like the globies and space fans are going to claim, then you'd see distortion in that horizon, that hill behind the lunar ascender. You don't. It's crisp 100%, showing that the rocket engine has been turned off, which means now it has no more force of energy or no more base speed other than what we're going to watch, because bearing in mind the engine cannot be turned back on again according to their official narrative. Their official narrative is it's the rocket plume is see-through, but we've just seen a proper rocket golden plume, debunking that. And again, if they're going to say that's some sort of chemical reaction and that now the rocket stroke lunar ascender is now using its invisible rocket plume technology method, then we would see distortion in the horizon below the ascender, on that horizon, that hill. We don't. It's totally crisp. We know this is a space prop anyway. Link in the description for the techniques they used to get away with this charade that we're actually looking at. All right, I won't go into that now because there's loads to cover here. So now we've looked at the rocket plume and then it disappearing, and then there's no distortion, kind of exposing it for being a prop, the prop that it is. And of course the fact there's no distortion destroys the space fans' idea or fantasy that it's an invisible plume, otherwise we'd have seen distortion in the background. Having debunked and destroyed all that, we're now going to watch this at normal speed and see how slow now this is ascending up, knowing that its whole rocket system has been used up here within seconds of this thing actually leaving the landing gear. And yet we're supposed to believe it's now going to dock with a spacecraft that's orbiting the moon doing 3,600 miles an hour. How fast do you think this thing is ascending up? Let's have a look. Normal speed. Remember, at this point in time, right, the rocket, the main engine's turned off. There's no plume. The golden plume we saw at the start, which was there to sell this lie, which has now come back to haunt them, is gone, which means the rocket has been turned off. If they're claiming it was invisible fumes, like I say, we'd have seen distortion in the hill behind. So we know now, according to the main story, based on what they've shown us, the main engine has been shut off. This thing can't be doing no more than, what, 30 mile an hour? Not even that. Look. Look.
Excite.
Let's come back again. Don't get me even started on the camera, syncing that and viewing that, supposedly controlled from 250,000 miles away. Don't even get me started on that. But look, remember,
Ignition. Run away.
main engine cut off now. Everything's gone. And look how slow it's going. And we're supposed to believe this thing now is going to join an orbiting craft that's currently doing 3,600 miles an hour. And look now, this is its top speed.
Houston, vector grid. Excite.
Absolutely ridiculous. If you believe this, Tosh, you are incredibly naive. And I'm being really nice about this. Now, at this point in time, the globe believers and space fans, out of pure desperation, are going to say one or two things. One, the moon's conditions are totally different to here on Earth. And two, the reaction control system will be what maneuvers and gives them thrust. One, I don't care what the supposed conditions of the moon are. We've just seen how slow that craft was ascending, and yet we're supposed to believe it's going to dock with something. A craft that's 60 miles above it, doing 3,600 miles an hour. That's ridiculous. And of course, we look at the reaction control system, which some of these might delude themselves into justifying this silly charade. And they even tell you, spacecraft reaction control systems are used for altitude control, re-entry, station keeping in orbit, maneuvering, docking procedures, orientation, or a backup means of deorbiting. Essentially, maneuvering. And in some cases, they will use it for thrust, for docking, and stuff like that. But you can't use it to do ludicrous speeds through space. It's not the main rocket, the ascending rocket. That's the thing that blasts off when they take off. So you cannot use, globe believers and cannonball fantasists, you cannot use this reaction control system as an excuse to defend your space pantomime delusion. Sorry, this is just for maneuvering. And then the final clip from Apollo 17, filmed from the orbiter, which is supposedly doing 3,600 miles an hour, looking down at the Lunar Lander stroke ascender now as it returns. Bearing in mind, we just saw the footage of it take off vertically, very slowly. We now join the action where it's now, strangely enough, despite the fact its main engine got cut off 20 foot maximum above the surface of the moon, we now join the action, strangely enough, where this lunar lander, now returning back to the orbiter, strangely enough, has matched the lunar orbiter speed of 3,600 miles an hour without having a main engine. Incredible, look! That's the lunar lander in the middle of our screen there, being filmed by the lunar orbiter from Apollo 17, the last mission. We saw it take off, how slow it was. We saw the engines cut out. We saw that there was no invisible plume, otherwise we would have got distortion on the hills. And yet mysteriously, in the next clip, somehow, without any propulsion system other than the RCS system, which is not used from thrust, somehow it's managed to match the lunar orbiter doing 3,600 miles an hour. And is also coming up closer. Incredible. If you can't see how silly all of this is by now, then no hope for you. There really isn't. You need to reassess your whole way of thinking, and you need to give your cognitive biases a serious slap. This is a joke, this moon landing. I've just broken it down and destroyed it using their own footage and their own claims, and made an absolute mockery of the final moon mission that was Apollo 17. Highlighting it for the joke that it is. If you want to believe in this tosh, like I've said many times before, that is on you. But don't expect me to entertain you and your silly fantasies. Oh dear.